Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast. I am excited for the episode that we have today. We completed a very interesting deal that we're going to unpack this summer. An old client of mine, Demand Drive, acquired Digital Impulse, and the founder CEO of Digital Impulse, Andrew Kolidas, is with me today. Andrew, thank you for joining.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, Todd. Good to see you again.
It was a really good transaction in terms of how well the pieces fit. And there's always turmoil and drama and excitement when a deal works its way from should we do this to due diligence. And we want to unpack a bunch of that. But can you start with a description of Digital Impulse? Give me a rough idea on the size and what is it that you do and who do you do it for?
Yeah, sure. So we're a full service digital agency. So half our business builds things, websites, digital experiences, campaign assets, list goes on. The other half provides a suite of digital marketing services from paid search to SEO, automation, HubSpot management, analytics, so a whole suite of services on that side. We skew B2B. We do a ton in the healthcare space and patient marketing as well, but we try to stay industry agnostic for the most part. We feel our services could be a great match for really any company out there. This year, we'll probably end at about $5.5 million, a little bit more than that as far as
revenue.
Yeah, of revenue. And we've been at this for about 12 years now. So it's been an exciting time for us in general, and obviously excited about this year, the deal that we got, and the future's looking bright.
So a couple of things on the roughly $5.5 million of revenue. How much of that is recurring? How much of that is the marketing, and how much is the web dev kind of project work?
Well, it's super interesting with our business model because we have a ton of blended retainers, which I think is a pretty unique product in our marketplace, where clients, so we can basically become their digital department. So we even have a lot of clients that we're on retainer with to manage website and new marketing. So we have this blend. So it's not that traditional split between dev, design, project work, and marketing. That being said, we do a ton of projects as well, but I would say like 70+ % of our revenues recurring.
Got it. And so take me through a little bit. If we go back, I don't know, a year or two or five, at what point did you start to think, maybe a better future for me and my co-owners and my team would be as part of something larger versus maintaining your independence?
It's a really fascinating question. I had a previous agency called Mindfire Interactive, and we actually sold that. We were only 9-10 people, only about $1.5 million at the time. But I was looking to do something different. We sort of started that agency by accident. We had a .com. And then we started providing services, and all of a sudden I had a digital agency, in my early mid-20s. So at that point, I just wanted to see how a bigger company operated. I wanted the collaboration. I wanted to be a part of something bigger. So my first acquisition, that was really a key piece. I went to another company. They were great, learned so much there, but then I quickly realized I really want to run my own company. I had my daughter at the time. So at that point, I definitely wanted to be part of something bigger. When I started Digital Impulse, I really wanted to do something that was sustainable. That was the key for me, to build a company that was a good culture fit for myself and was something that I could see myself at for potentially the rest of my career. So I honestly didn't think about any acquisition, any funding. We wore it like a badge that we were self-funded. I think
and you started all by yourself, correct?
Yeah, I had one partner, Jeff Mitchell, who we still have a great relationship with. And yeah, it was just two of us in a room, then three of us in a room. And I think, the approach I was taking at the time was I want to grow slow and controlled. I don't want to go for this explosive growth moment. I want a stable company where it's not like the traditional advertising model where maybe you lose a couple of clients and you have to trim people. I wanted to create a different type of environment. So I honestly looked at acquisition as, hey, I'm done. I'm ready to retire. Now I'm going to get out.
Meaning that's when you thought you would do a transaction is at the end of your career in 30 years.
Exactly. And because I'll be honest, I wasn't educated enough about the benefits. So the market was really hot for agencies in the last couple of years. And we got to a certain size where all of a sudden companies came knocking on our door, like a pretty significant number. And it was surprising. And I would show the emails to my partner and I'm like, I'm not even taking the call. There was one consultant, they were a part of a buy-side agency that kept emailing me. I was like, is this even a real person? Is this spam? Is this some automation strategy? And he wrote me a message that was like, listen, just take the call with me, 15 minutes. Just hear what I have to say. And he was persistent. And I said to myself, you know what? Like, I'm going to do that. And just had a really eye-opening question. I have to give him some credit here for just changing the narrative in my head. He's like, no, acquisition is how you grow. It's not how an ends to or means to an end. It's how you grow. And I never, ever looked at it from that lens before. And, as you grow, if you're a services company, your payroll's rising, your expenses are rising, the pressure's rising. And as an individual, you're not seeing the direct benefit. It's not like
you're always catching up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the pressure gets high. So I think everybody has a point where, I'm a natural risk taker. It's part of my personality. But when you have kids and a family and a mortgage, that tempers some of your natural risk-taking nature. And I realized at that point, if we're going to keep growing, we don't have any funding, all self-funded, I'm going to be putting my own personal money on the line permanently. And eventually, if you have a bad month, like 2 or 3 years down the road, the payroll's too high to cover. So what I saw in myself, I was getting more conservative for the first time as a business owner. And this consultant said, why are you doing it this way? Like, you can't grow that way. We had a really great conversation. He said, this opportunity is not a good fit because we talked about it. I'll keep that confidential. But he was like, talk to private equity, talk to people. You're missing an opportunity to grow quicker, better, and create a better company. And that just flipped my thinking. So I started at that point looking at this from a completely new lens and started picking up the phone and having some of these great conversations. And the more I spoke to different companies, some you have a natural connection with, some you're like, not a good fit. But I just started seeing opportunity. And that helped bring me to the point where I actually started to more look for the right situation. That would be honestly best for myself, equally good for my partners, but most importantly, more than equally fair to my employees, which are really the lifeblood of how we've got here to this date.
And then, so now that you've got that focus a little bit, did you even know enough to say, okay, here's the 2 or 3 or 5 important criterias, or did you have to figure that out along the way?
That's a really good question. I mean, the stuff that I was more green about was, valuation and sort of worth and some of the calculations, because when you're totally self-funded and sort of running even your accounting in a certain way that's like homegrown, you don't really look at, reoccurring revenue in the same way. And, I learned a lot through the process just by the questions that were being asked of me. But one thing I quickly realized, I had to figure out what was the best fit for my people and my partners. And one thing I had to cross off the list was another agency, because we've had conversations with companies similar to us that are looking for size and scale and an executive team. And hiring was pretty tough for people. So it's a way to help grow another agency.
So when you say another agency, you mean putting together kind of two similar companies.
Yes.
And so now instead of being 5.5 million, maybe we're 11 or 12 million, but essentially we're the same thing, just bigger.
Exactly.
Why was that not a fit for you?
Really, it was because of our people. So if I have a director of client services, I have a director of marketing services, I have all these people that have, built a career here, that I've given the ball to, that have helped me succeed and helped the company succeed. I don't want to put them in a situation where now they're working maybe for somebody else that's a department head that has a redundant role, and they've taken a step back in their career, or maybe it's impossible to vet out every single person at a company. You could talk to an executive team, have amazing conversations, and maybe there's not a great culture fit for some of my staff. So then it becomes like, who survives? Who gets the good position? Right. And then honestly, when you combine two agencies that do the same thing, you're going to have redundancy. And then you're going to maybe have to make some cuts, and it's not even your call. So I just saw that as too messy a situation. And obviously, if we're the ones being acquired on paper, the other firm really is going to make those decisions at the end of the day. So it was too much risk. And, I have a vision for what we're building. And to coordinate that with somebody else who's acquiring you was too difficult a task for me to wrap my head around. It wasn't completely off the table. We had some great conversations with other agencies, but they might want to slice and dice you into different departments.
Well, and I think that's true, right? And this is where a lot of times M&A get a bad reputation, because when you put two like-sized and like-service groups together, you automatically have redundancies. If I can eliminate a lot of those redundancies, I'll become more profitable. So I sacrifice humans for profit. And that's one way of building a business. Another way is not to get companies that do the same thing, but to do tangential things.
Yes.
And this is where I think with Demand Drive, right, that you saw right away, somebody that is tangential to us, that needs what we do, and we can cross-sell into them, becomes a real accelerant and creates opportunity for everybody. So well, first of all, do you remember how you and I met?
Yeah. I mean, I know, I think I first contacted you on LinkedIn, I believe.
Yes.
I saw some of your content, and I contacted you and said, hey, I need some advice here. And you were very responsive, and we had a great conversation.
Yeah. And we talked about the same kind of things we're talking about today. And then, so the ultimate acquirer for you is a great company. It's owned by Everlane Capital. It's a company called Demand Drive. We were fortunate enough, Demand Drive was a client of mine 2 years ago. And to your point, they wanted to accelerate through acquisition, know that they needed a partner. We hunted down a whole bunch, and for a bunch of different reasons, they settled on Everlane and the team there to help them accelerate. You're an example of that because you're their second acquisition. Do you remember the first time that you met Demand Drive, and was that an immediate click for you, or did it take time to evolve to what it was?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we had another firm that had reached out to us and said, hey, we have a potential suitor that wants to have a conversation with you. So we met Demand Drive, over a year before we actually did a deal with them, and had some really great conversations with the team there. Great rapport. So I think the hardest box to check, like, there's business fit that's critically important, but there's personality fit. We're a very, I think, down to earth group here. We're a very flat organization. So it's more about roles and responsibility more than, hey, somebody else is more important than somebody else. So I felt like the vibe that the principals of Demand Drive had were extremely aligned with our personalities. And if we were trying to get out or sell something to just move on, it wouldn't have mattered as much. But since we were in it to win it, we want to build something large. The partnership between us and the acquiring company on a human level was just critically important. I also have some partners who have a really good sense of people. And, Peter, our CTO, who does an amazing job, is very, I wouldn't call him finicky, but he's a good read of people. And I think intrinsically he was like, are we going to really find somebody we'd want to do business with? And he was a little bit of my litmus test. So I made sure I wasn't wearing rose-colored glasses, where instantaneously had such a great connection. And he was like, yes, I would do this. And that was extremely telling for me as well. Go ahead.
I hear this a lot from people. Like, am I really going to find a group like that? And how am I going to know? Right? Because we're dating and they're on their best behavior, whatever. Was there anything that you look back on that was a real indicator that this is the right place for us?
Well, do you know what's super interesting? And I took this approach during any of these conversations. Was you want to put your best foot forward when you're speaking to people, just like you would at a sales call or anything like that. But you just want to completely be yourself. Because that's what people need to see. So unlike if you're selling a website deal or marketing campaign, I think you could sometimes, tweak your approach and personality to match whoever the buyer or the potential client is. That's just, basic mirroring tactics that can be done in a super authentic way as well. But in this process, we're like, we're just going to completely be ourselves, because that's going to help us find the right partner that we want to work with. So I think it's just, you could tell by people's reactions, how they absorb some of the stuff that you're saying, with the way they emote back. So we've done a lot of hiring over the years and have worked with a lot of people. So I don't know, it was just a very natural, intuitive feeling that we got.
And I think that advice is good. It's advice I give to clients all the time, that the objective is not to get married, it's to stay married, right? Yeah. And there's plenty for a good agency, yours being one of them. For a good business, there are plenty of opportunities. You shouldn't pretend to be anything that you're not, because then you're going to have to pretend to be that. You're going to have to be on that behavior for the next 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years, right? It's just, and I also think the construct of a deal is important because it is the validation of what you're telling people. If you say, hey, we're excited, this is going to be a great partnership, I want 90% of my consideration in cash and a 1-year earnout, that doesn't ring as true as somebody that says, I want cash and I want equity and I want to see level position and on and on and on. Can you comment at all on the structure of what your transaction was like? And in that structure, what was most important to you guys?
Yeah, I think, again, since we want to build something bigger. So a lot of companies when they're going through this process, they want to take money off the table. They want to put it in the bank and they want to take pressure off and kind of move on to the next phase of their life. And they can convince themselves like, oh yeah, and we're going to grow too, but that's not really their motivation. I think with us in particular, that second bite was so incredibly important to us, not just from a motivation standpoint, but we wanted a firm that believed in the second bite, because that's what's going to keep us growing. That's what's going to make this a success. Like we could have taken money off the table in a ton of different deals. So I wasn't really too concerned with that, but we rolled over a good amount of equity and that was our choice. We actually negotiated to roll over more equity because we just believe in the platform. The teams have been great. The team at Everlane has been amazing throughout the entire process. Team at Demand Drive and another company, JRP, who's part of the platform as well. I can't, there's always like, oh, buyer beware in anything from a consumer product to anything like this. But I have to say, it's been completely as advertised. So we wanted more equity because we wanted to grow this huge.
And let me ask this. So the guys at Everlane are terrific, Evan and Daniel and Harry, and those guys have a long track record of significantly growing businesses to a very nice exit for everybody included. Dan and Lindsay, the founders of Demand Drive, have a very significant piece of equity in Demand Drive still. What gave you greater comfort? The fact that, hey, there's a private equity group that has a tremendous track record, or there's a management team that is committed and excited and bought in significantly?
Do you know what? A really good question. I think it's a bunch of different things. I think obviously the track record of doing this before. I think the business fits were just unbelievable. Like, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted a situation where there was no overlap or very little overlap, and that we could truly complement each other's offerings. I think that's been a home run so far for us, and a lot of the conversations that we're having. We're only a couple months in, have a lot of amazing plans cooking. So between the people and the companies and the track record, that was a winning combination. But I think, honestly, a big piece of it was how sure they were about the acquisition.
Right.
Like, we speak to a lot of companies, but they were aggressive. They saw the fit. They saw the vision, and I shared the vision. And it was sort of like instantaneous for me because they truly believed in what they were doing with this. That gave me confidence, right, to be honest, because of how sure they were that this was the right fit. And it felt great, and it was great.
So, and I know you've only been into it for a couple of months, but one of the things I hear from guys a lot is, I don't want to be an employee anywhere. I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to, have to show up at a certain time and all that. You've been, an entrepreneur for almost all your life. Do you anticipate that changing much? Have they signaled to you things are going to be different? Can you comment on that some?
Yeah, they really let people run their business. That's part of their model, is to be somewhat hands-off, and they don't want to mess with success of how you've grown the company to date. What they do is they want to provide support, guidance, and structure, and accountability, which is something that I was honestly super excited about. That and general brain, like neural network, brain share stuff that's worked. I realized that when you're homegrown as far as a company, and I don't have like a formal business training, there are just some of the things that you might not know. There are tactics and strategies that we're just missing out on. So that's been pretty amazing, but they want us to run our company, and they want to empower us, give us confidence, resources to really make it work. So that's been really inspiring. And I think, we talk about this internally. It's sometimes good to have another layer of accountability. Like, I always felt extremely accountable to my partners, to my staff. That's kept me going for a long time to this point. But honestly, doing stuff like reporting on numbers to another, to the board is something that is a little bit of an adjustment, but honestly, it's great for me.
Sure.
To keep us on track. And I think it's been great.
It's a level of maturity for sure.
Yeah.
And so some nitpicky things.
Yeah.
Are you still Digital Impulse? Will you always be Digital Impulse, or what are they doing about the name, and how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, right now, Digital Impulse, we're still running our brand as usual, as is Demand Drive, as is JRP. Totally flexible for the future. I've said this, and I mean this: whatever is best for the platform, that's what I want to do. It's a very singular mindset, but that's how I'm operating mentally and into the future. It's like whatever's best. I don't care about right or wrong. I don't care if I like it or dislike it. It's whatever is best. That's what I want to happen, because that's what should happen. And that's going to be my first part.
Yeah, and your money's where your mouth is, right? You got a big chunk of equity there that is going to have a nice return on.
Yeah, do you know what? Like, at the end of the day, business value is business value. Business could be the most complicated thing on earth, but at the end of the day, it's cash in, cash out.
True.
If our people are feeling great, that's the other North Star. Morale, people being respected, just general vibe and culture. But I honestly think the vibe and the culture add to the number of the bank account of the day. there's a direct correlation between that. So
Absolutely.
whatever's best.
So, and let me ask this now, shifting gears just a little bit. So you had some contact. So you're in the Boston area. Demand Drive is in the Boston area. You'd known of each other. You'd spoke to them before. There was certainly an opportunity for you to, just work directly with Demand Drive and Everlane to try to do a deal. Why did you decide to use a banker? Why did you decide to use somebody like me versus just finding a lawyer and progressing that way?
A lot of reasons. One is expertise on what a deal should look like. And, when you go through a process like this, there's a lot of emotions. First of all, you have to run your business during the process as well. So you don't want to take your eye off of what's most important, which is the health of, your P&L and your people and your clients and all of that. It's a lot of work that has to go into it. And it's sort of like, with any business negotiation, there's a lot. There's a lot of feelings, emotions. You don't need to be involved in all those conversations. You have to keep it business, and working with a banker as an intermediary can help really take information and share it in a way that is great to each party, to be that intermediary. So you don't have to, be, cooking the meal and serving it at the same time. It's like you need some layer of separation, so you're making pragmatic decisions. But I have to give you a lot of credit. There's a lot of emotions that go in. I have multiple partners. There's a lot of balls in the air, and you help us navigate all those waters in a way that was invaluable to the process.
Well, thank you for that. I think two things. At the end of the day, we could all, Demand Drive and you guys, rely on the fact that it is clear this is a better together organization than a separate organization from that perspective. I think too, and I'll just give myself a quick commercial here, the value was improved, as I looked at it, probably 2 or 3 times greater than what our fee was. And I know people are always like, I don't know, it's expensive to have a banker, or we got to pay him a big fee, or whatever the case is. By my mathematics, I think we came out well ahead on that measure.
Yeah. A couple of comments on that as well. I mean, if using a banker can pay for itself, that would be my advice to people, because if there's even a touch bit more negotiation, more value they get out of the deal, that's the fee right there. Right. And then it's like, it's way beyond a concierge type service. You introduce legal resources, accounting resources, all these things that we needed. And going through the process of due diligence is definitely something that's difficult emotionally, mentally. It's almost you get a second job on top of your other job, and dreams and expectations and all these things wrapped in. So the more support during the process is better. I would tell people, don't cheap out on that. You're going to regret it if you do. Don't price shop for the lowest price. That's not what's important in a deal like this. At the end of the day, it's a very, very small fraction of the deal. Get the best deal and work with the best people.
I appreciate you saying so. We preach that, and it turns out to be true almost every time. Now that you're through a transaction, it's been a couple months in the rearview mirror. When you look back at the process, what surprised you most that you didn't expect?
That's a really great question. And you had mentioned this. You said the team at Everlane is great to work with. And, we just believe you on face value. I have a pretty good BS meter as far as reading that. And I have to give you credit that I wasn't believing what you were saying because I wanted to, because it was easiest. No, I did believe what you were saying. And if you're going to hire experts, you have to trust them, or what's the point? And if you don't trust them, you hire the wrong expert.
Well, continue, then I'll go.
Yeah. So I think the thing that I was pleasantly surprised with was due diligence could be scary. I have to give huge credit to my partners, especially Chapin Bennett, our COO, who did a fantastic job throughout the due diligence process. I went to Greece for a couple of weeks, had this first time traveling abroad with the family, and then due diligence was hitting, and he did
Chapin was definitely a champion. It allowed the business, because it's so important that your business has to continue to perform during due diligence, because nobody wants to buy something that's tailing off, right?
Yeah, and you know what everybody's expecting is last minute the rug's pulled out. And that was what I was most fearful for. And that had nothing to do with Everlane. It had to do with stories I heard from other people where it's like they go through this process, they make sure you're pot committed, and then last minute they say, oh, we found something. Yikes, this isn't good. And you know what? Like every single business on the planet has something that you could flag. It's just
right.
It's just how it is. And you said, I've done deals with them before. Unless they find something egregious or you misrepresented, don't worry about it. But I was even preparing my partners to be like, expect maybe a potential reduction. And, that's just how the game works. And when we got to the end of the process and everything was as advertised, the whole thing. And I think that was what I was most surprised at. I was like, no, everybody was completely honest, transparent, and they just did great business. And you know what? And that's why it's like even last minute, we're like seeing how the groups operated. We're like, hey, how do we put more equity in? And some of my partners were like, I want more.
It's interesting because there's a few things that we do behind the scenes along the way to make sure that valuation doesn't shift. You guys performed all along the way, and that is helpful. One of those things behind the scenes that we do is make sure we have a real quality partner that, if you think about it from Everlane's perspective, they put in a bunch of millions to get Demand Drive, a bunch of millions to add on another, a bunch of millions to get you guys. And if something destroys the fabric of that company, they have so much more to lose than we do in the transaction. So great private equity groups, and I would consider Everlane one of them. Great private equity groups don't create wealth by squeezing a few $100,000 out of an entrepreneur at close. What they do is they destroy wealth, and they know that. When you have much bigger transactions where the squeeze could net you $5 or $10 or $25 million on a $500 million transaction, that happens probably more often than not. Yeah. On transactions of this size, it's about creating an environment where a CEO like yourself and Dan and Lindsay and the others that they have put together, along with the engine that Everlane is, can create real wealth that's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and they'll overlook the pennies on the ground because they're focused on the dollars in the future.
Yeah, 1,000%. And that's the way I sort of operate as well. I'm not cheap when it comes to purchasing things myself, because I'm looking at the benefit, I'm looking at the ease of use, I'm looking at the aggregate, like where does this get me? So it sort of like went along with, if we're worried about like a couple $100,000 here and there, we're having the wrong conversation. I'm trying to create something that's worth like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. Let me ask a couple last things. So we're coming to the end of the year, and you guys are thinking into 2024. Again, this goes back to a little bit of an earlier theme, but how involved are you in what the larger entity is going to do in 24 and 25? Do you have your eyes on potential acquisitions in certain capability sets? Are people asking for your input? What's all that like?
Yeah, don't want to give away too much of the plans, but yeah, I've been highly involved, which has been great. That's something that I wouldn't say is surprising, but until you work with people, you just don't know. But my voice is heard. And that really motivates me, because I want to prove to new people I'm working with that I know what I'm doing and
can bring value. And
and can do that. So it's like I feel sort of like a kid in a candy store, where now it's like I could bring some of my ideation and ideas to life quickly with resources. It's been fantastic. And as far as like the future, it's like obviously we want to integrate our services at a higher level and create an offering that's truly unique in the marketplace. I won't go too much into acquisition strategy, anything like that, but it's how do we just become a unique player in the market for the entire funnel of marketing from the top to the bottom, and actually turn marketing efforts directly into revenue, I think is super exciting. And it's something that I think is a missing component in the marketplace that we can fill. So you'll see more in the next couple of years.
That'll be very exciting to watch. Let me end with this question. So you have been what I would describe as a very successful person, a successful entrepreneur. You've got a great family, good family life, community life, all that stuff. Is there something or someone or an event that's happened in your past that you would point to and say, I'm going to give a lot of credit to this person or this book or this event?
You know what? It's super interesting. I could probably flag a lot of things, but I'll tell this quick story because it was something that was super interesting. So I mentioned originally we had this little .com thing that we're getting off the ground. This was like, year 2001, 2000, bubble burst. We didn't know what we were doing. It wasn't a bad idea. We just didn't know how to execute it. So people started, like, what do we do? Right? We have an office. I already have the bug to run my own business, but I don't really have a product. And people that we were working with the .com and other partners would be like, hey, do you know anybody who makes a website? And I kept getting that question asked. And I said, I wonder if I could build a website. So I went and downloaded software. I took a bunch of tutorials. And I used to like it, my early 20s, I'd stay up 24 hours straight trying to learn something. I just get obsessed with it. And I was like, I bet I could make a website. So one of my really, really good friends growing up from junior high school to high school, college roommate, he had mentioned, I'd mentioned, hey, why don't we make a business selling websites? And he said, you don't even know how to make a website. How are you going to do that? And I just heard the doubt in his voice. And, this is one of my best friends even now. So, and I've told him this story. And at that moment I said, like in my head, I was like, I'm going to make a website and sell it. You'll see. So interestingly enough, it was for this company called Better Comfort Systems, HVAC company locally here. That van parks in my lot at my new office all the time. I see their logo. And I sold the website for $200.
Wow.
And profusely thanked them.
Yes.
And that was the start of this entire career, was that moment of somebody saying, you can't do that. And that's sort of like how
the rocket fuel that started.
Yeah. It's like, listen, a lot of that comes from within too, but that was a earmark moment for me that set me in this whole path to having this company and getting into this whole industry.
Yeah. And, it's to follow up on the point you made earlier, this was a great transaction. It was great to work on. I enjoyed our time together, but it really is just a step that will provide you certainly a second bite, perhaps even a third bite like others have enjoyed. It'll be great to watch your progression, watch how Everlane and Dan and Lindsay and Demand Drive continue to pull all this together to be that, unique offering in the space. For you to share some of your insights and thoughts about the transaction is always helpful and appreciated. So I will say thank you for making the time to share that with us. And I'll wish you certainly the best in 2024 as you guys execute on your plans.
No, much appreciated, Todd. And I've said it before, I've said it again, you are an integral piece of the process. So many thanks to you, your consultation through the process, just everything you did. So if anybody's listening to this, definitely give Todd a call if you're thinking about that next step. And yeah, it was super exciting. I couldn't be more excited about the future. I finally feel like I have a destination I'm going to. I'm off the treadmill of endless, travels, running in place. Now I actually feel like I'm building something. So definitely, my advice to anybody listening on this is don't look at acquisition as an end. Look at acquisition as a beginning.
Great summary. We will, and by the way, Andrew's contact information will be on the show notes at secondbitepodcast.com. You can track it down there. You can track me down there on LinkedIn as well, and so on. Andrew, thanks again for your time.
No, much appreciated, Todd, and we'll speak again soon. Hey, we'll do a check-in.
We'll do a check-in at the end of next year. That would be fantastic. I'll take you up on that.
All right. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.